What's up, animation lovers? Today, we will talk about one of the most remarkable transformations in cinematic history. Over the past 3 decades, Pixar Animation Studios hasn't just pushed the boundaries of technology, they've revolutionized what animation can be, what it can express, and how it connects with audiences worldwide. From the blocky, toy-like characters of 1995 to the photorealistic fur, water, and human expressions we see today, Pixar's journey is a masterclass in artistic evolution. So buckle up, because we're about to explore how Pixar's animation style has transformed from 1995 to 2026. The revolutionary beginning. Toy Story 1995. Let's rewind to 1995. When Toy Story premiered, audiences had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just the first feature-length computer-animated film, it was a watershed moment that changed cinema forever. But here's the thing, the limitations of 1995 technology actually shaped Pixar's artistic choices in ways that would define their philosophy for decades to come. The animation style was necessarily simple. Woody and Buzz weren't designed with realistic human skin or complex facial muscles because the technology couldn't handle it. Instead, Pixar made a brilliant creative choice. They focused on toys. Plastic surfaces, hard edges, and simplified forms were perfect for the hardware limitations of the time. The characters had minimal facial features, simple eyes, basic mouth shapes, but the animators squeezed every ounce of emotion from those constraints. Textures were flat and repetitive. Lighting was basic, with simple shadows and highlights. There was no subsurface scattering, no complex ray tracing, no sophisticated shaders. The animation was groundbreaking for its time, but compared to what would come later, it was remarkably primitive. Yet within these limitations, Pixar established something crucial, their commitment to character and story over technical showmanship. Learning to handle complexity, 1998 to 2003. By 1998's A Bug's Life, Pixar was already pushing beyond toys. Now they were rendering organic forms insects with translucent wings, natural environments, and complex crowd scenes with hundreds of ants. The jump in technical sophistication was enormous. Each blade of grass, each leaf, each ant in the colony represented new challenges in modeling, texturing, and rendering. The film required Pixar to master the art of creating believable nature at a miniature scale. They studied how light interacts with translucent insect wings, creating shaders that showed delicate veining and the way sunlight would pass through them with a subtle glow. The organic shapes of leaves, flowers, and vegetation demanded new modeling techniques. Nothing could look artificial or geometric anymore. Every surface needed irregularity, asymmetry, the beautiful imperfection of the natural world. The lighting became more naturalistic, with sunlight filtering through leaves and casting dappled shadows that danced across the ground. Textures showed more variety and detail, the rough bark of trees, the smooth surface of seeds, the fuzzy bodies of caterpillars. Pixar's artists learned to observe nature with scientific precision, then recreate it with artistic interpretation. But most importantly, Pixar was developing the rendering pipeline that would carry them forward. RenderMan was evolving rapidly, becoming more powerful with each film. The crowd simulation system they built for A Bug's Life, capable of animating hundreds of individual ants with distinct behaviors, would become foundational technology for future films. Toy Story 2 in 1999 showed how far they'd come in just 4 years. The same characters now had more refined surfaces, better lighting, more sophisticated animation. The sequel looked noticeably better than the original, demonstrating Pixar's commitment to constant technical improvement. But the real breakthrough came in 2001 with Monsters Incorporated. This film introduced fur simulation that changed everything. Sully's 2.3 million individual hairs required entirely new rendering technology. The fist simulation system allowed each hair to move independently, respond to wind and motion, and interact with other hairs. This wasn't just a technical achievement, it created characters with unprecedented warmth and tangibility. When Boo hugged Sully, audiences could almost feel that soft blue fur. The Water Revolution. Finding Nemo, 2003. If Monsters Incorporated conquered fur, Finding Nemo conquered water, arguably the most challenging element to render convincingly. Water reflects, refracts, absorbs light, creates caustics, and moves in infinitely complex ways. Pixar developed entirely new shaders and rendering techniques to capture the way light behaves underwater. The technical challenges were staggering. Water doesn't just look one way, it changes dramatically depending on depth, clarity, time of day, and surrounding environment. Near the surface, sunlight creates dancing caustic patterns on the ocean floor, those mesmerizing ripples of concentrated light. Deeper down, colors shift as different wavelengths of light are absorbed. Reds disappear first, leaving everything bathed in blues and greens. Pixar's team had to simulate all of this while maintaining artistic control over every shot. The ocean environment required simulating light scattering, creating realistic particle systems for floating debris and plankton, and developing new approaches to color and visibility at depth. They studied how underwater photography works, understanding why distant objects appear hazier and bluer. They researched the optical properties of seawater, learning how suspended particles scatter light and create that characteristic underwater atmosphere. The translucent quality of jellyfish presented its own puzzle. These creatures needed to glow with internal luminescence while maintaining volume and depth. The shimmer of fish scales required analyzing how microscopic surface structures catch and reflect light at different angles. The play of sunlight through water, creating those iconic God rays that penetrate from above, demanded sophisticated volumetric rendering techniques that were pushing the absolute limits of their technology. Each required custom solutions. Finding Nemo raised the bar so high that it took years for other studios to catch up. The film essentially became a masterclass in water rendering, setting standards that would influence the entire animation industry. But beyond the technical wizardry, Finding Nemo showed Pixar's animation style maturing in another crucial way: emotional depth. The story dealt with loss, anxiety, disability, and parental fear, heavy themes that required performances to match. The character animation was more nuanced, the facial expressions more subtle and complex. Marlin's worried eyes carried the weight of trauma and protective love. Every nervous glance, every moment of hesitation told his story. Dory's forgetful but optimistic expressions, the way her face would brighten with sudden enthusiasm, then cloud with confusion, required sophisticated rigging and animation that went far beyond the simple keyframe animation of early Toy Story. The animators were now creating genuine performances, with emotional beats and character arcs expressed through movement and expression as much as through dialogue. The Human Challenge, The Incredibles, 2004. For years, Pixar deliberately avoided realistic human characters. The uncanny valley, that unsettling feeling when something looks almost but not quite human, was a well-known trap. But with The Incredibles, they couldn't avoid it any longer. The story demanded human heroes, not toys or bugs or monsters. Pixar's solution was brilliant: stylization. Rather than attempting photorealism, they embraced a retro comic book aesthetic. Characters had exaggerated proportions, simplified features, and a graphic quality that avoided the uncanny valley entirely. Bob Parr's square jaw, Elastigirl's flexible body, Dash's wide eyes, these were clearly not meant to look photographically real, and that's exactly why they worked. But beneath the stylization, the technical sophistication was profound. The facial rigging system allowed for incredibly subtle expressions. The body animation showed real understanding of weight, momentum, and physics. Cloth simulation brought superhero costumes to life. The Incredibles proved that Pixar could handle human characters by being smart about how they were designed and animated. Peak technical artistry, 2006 to 2010. The mid-2000s saw Pixar hitting an incredible creative stride. Cars in 2006 demonstrated their ability to make even mechanical objects feel alive and emotional. The paint shaders on the vehicles were among the most sophisticated ever created, with accurate reflections, depth, and metallic qualities. Every scratch, every reflection in chrome, every rubber texture on tires showed obsessive attention to detail. Ratatouille in 2007 tackled food notoriously difficult because we all know exactly how food should look. Unlike fantastical creatures or stylized characters, food is something we see and interact with every day. Our brains are incredibly attuned to spotting when food looks wrong, making it one of the most unforgiving subjects to render convincingly. The team studied light transmission through vegetables with scientific rigor, observing how tomatoes glow red when backlit, how the translucent layers of an onion catch and diffuse light differently than opaque carrots. They analyzed the way sauces catch highlights the glossy sheen of a reduction, the way oil separates and creates rainbow patterns, the thickness and viscosity visible in how liquid moves and settles. The texture of bread crust became its own research project. The golden brown color gradients, the tiny cracks and imperfections, the way crusty exterior contrasts with soft interior. They developed advanced subsurface scattering techniques that made vegetables look genuinely fresh and appetizing, showing how light penetrates the surface and scatters beneath, giving produce that characteristic healthy glow. It wasn't just about technical accuracy. It was about making food that made audiences hungry. Every dish needed to look delicious, aromatic, irresistible. The steam rising from a hot plate, the glistening of butter, the caramelization on roasted vegetables, these weren't just visual effects, they were gastronomic storytelling. But WALL-E in 2008 might represent the peak of this era, a film with minimal dialogue, where emotion had to be conveyed almost entirely through animation and visual storytelling. WALL-E's eyes, just binocular lenses, somehow expressed more emotion than most animated characters with full facial features. The weathered, rusty textures of a robot who'd spent centuries alone, the desolate post-apocalyptic environments, the contrast with the sterile spaceship, every visual choice served the story. WALL-E also showcased Pixar's lighting mastery. The golden hour light of Earth, the harsh brightness of space, the soft artificial glow of the Axiom, each environment had distinct, emotionally resonant lighting. The cinematography was as sophisticated as any live-action film, with deliberate shot composition, focus pulls, and camera movement that guided the audience's eye and emotions. Refinement and expansion, 2010 to 2015. Toy Story 3 in 2010 offered a direct comparison to where Pixar started. The same characters, 15 years later, with vastly improved rendering. It was like watching a visual time-lapse of technological evolution. Woody, Buzz, and the gang now existed in a world that looked almost photorealistic compared to the simplified environments of 1995. Skin textures on Andy, now 18, showed pores and subtle imperfections, the slight unevenness of real human skin, the way light interacts with facial features, the natural variations in tone and texture. His hands showed the detail of fingerprints and knuckle wrinkles. Every frame demonstrated how far human rendering had progressed. The toys themselves had more sophisticated materials. You could see wear patterns from years of play, scuffs and scratches that told stories of their adventures, the aging of plastic that had lost its original shine, the fraying of fabric on Jesse's outfit. Woody's pull string looked genuinely worn. His hat showed the creases and dirt of age. The lighting and shadows were incomparably more realistic, with accurate bounce light, subtle ambient occlusion in crevices, and sophisticated ray-traced reflections. The same characters had transformed from charming but primitive 3D models into tangible, believable objects you felt you could reach out and touch. Brave in 2012 pushed hair simulation to new extremes. Merida's curly red hair consisted of over 111,000 springs and took 3 years to perfect. Each curl had to maintain its shape while moving naturally, catching light realistically, and interacting properly with her body and clothing. The result was hair that felt genuinely alive, bouncing and swaying with her movements. But Brave was also significant for its environment. The Scottish Highlands required complex vegetation systems, atmospheric effects, and naturalistic lighting that captured the misty, magical quality of the setting. Pixar was now handling vast outdoor environments with the same confidence they'd once reserved for controlled indoor spaces. The emotional breakthrough, Inside Out 2015. Inside Out represented a fascinating challenge. How do you visualize abstract concepts like emotions and memories? Pixar's solution combined stylization with sophisticated rendering. The emotion characters glowed with internal light, their translucent bodies suggesting energy and thought. Memory orbs had complex layered surfaces, showing depth and importance through color and luminosity. The animation style itself became more expressionistic. Joy's movements were light and bouncy. Sadness was slow and heavy. Anger was quick and explosive. Each character's animation matched their emotional nature. This wasn't just good character animation. It was animation as metaphor, where movement patterns conveyed psychological truth. The contrast between the stylized emotion world and the more realistic depiction of Riley and her family showed Pixar's range. They could now seamlessly blend different levels of realism within a single film, using style itself as a storytelling tool. Coco, in 2017, was a masterpiece of cultural authenticity and visual splendor. The Land of the Dead exploded with color marigold petals, glowing alabrage spirit animals, intricate papel picado decorations. But it wasn't just beautiful. Every visual element was grounded in Mexican cultural traditions. Pixar worked with cultural consultants to ensure authenticity in how the skeleton characters were designed, how the architecture reflected Mexican styles, how even the lighting captured the warm quality of Mexican sunlight. The skeleton characters themselves were a technical marvel bones, with subtle textures and imperfections, clothing that draped and moved naturally on skeletal frames, facial animation that created expressions without muscles or skin. It proved that Pixar could make literally anything feel alive and emotionally resonant. Incredibles 2 in 2018 showed how much human animation had improved since 2004. The same family, now rendered with far more sophisticated technology. Skin shaders incorporated subsurface scattering, showing light penetrating and diffusing through flesh. Facial animation was more nuanced, with subtle muscle movements and micro-expressions. Hair simulation had evolved dramatically. Violet's hair moved with realistic physics, each strand behaving independently yet cohesively. Hyperrealistic details, 2020 to 2023. Soul in 2020 pushed Pixar into near photorealistic human rendering. The opening sequence in New York City is stunning reflections in windows, the weathered texture of buildings, the play of light through urban environments. Joe Gardner looks and moves more realistically than any previous Pixar human. The skin shaders show pores, wrinkles, the way light behaves differently on various parts of the face. The animation captures subtle weight shifts, natural breathing, all the tiny movements that make a character feel genuinely alive. But Soul also showed Pixar's continued commitment to stylization when it served the story. The Great Before was deliberately abstract, with Soul characters as simple shapes that could still express complex emotions. This flexibility moving between photorealism and abstraction demonstrated complete mastery of the medium. Turning Red in 2022 embraced anime-influenced animation styles, with characters expressing emotions through exaggerated reactions and stylized effects like sweat drops and speed lines. The giant red panda transformation was both adorable and believably weighty. This wasn't Pixar trying to look like anime, it was Pixar incorporating anime's expressive language into their own aesthetic. Elemental in 2023 tackled perhaps their most abstract challenge yet, characters made of pure elements. Creating characters from fire, water, earth, and air required entirely new rendering approaches that pushed Pixar into uncharted territory. How do you make something formless have form? How do you create facial expressions in materials that constantly flow and change? Water had to look like water with proper refraction, reflection, and fluid dynamics, while also being a character with expressions and personality. The team developed systems where water droplets could cluster to form eyes and mouths, maintaining realistic water physics while creating readable emotions. Ember's water movements needed to feel liquid and natural, yet controlled enough to convey subtle acting choices. Fire needed to burn and flicker realistically, while forming recognizable facial features. Wade's flames had to dance and pulse with authentic combustion behavior, yet somehow coalesce into expressions that audiences could read. The challenge was maintaining the chaotic, organic nature of fire while imposing just enough structure for character animation. Earth characters required simulating granular materials, rocks, soil, and minerals that could shift and settle while holding anthropomorphic shapes. Air characters were perhaps most difficult, being nearly invisible yet needing presence and definition. Inside Out 2 in 2024 showed how much had changed in just 9 years. The emotion characters now had even more sophisticated rendering, with more complex internal glow effects and subtle surface variations. The realistic sequences were indistinguishable from live action in some shots. Riley's animation captured the awkwardness of early teenage years with painful accuracy, every uncomfortable posture, every self-conscious gesture. The new emotions, anxiety, envy, ennui, embarrassment, each had distinct animation styles that perfectly captured their psychological nature. Anxiety's jittery, overlapping movements, ennui's languid slouch, embarrassment's attempts to make himself smaller. The character animation had become psychology made visual. Elio, releasing in 2025, represents Pixar's venture into space on an unprecedented scale. Early footage suggests they're bringing their photorealistic Earth rendering to alien worlds. The challenge isn't just technical, it's imaginative. How do you create alien environments that feel genuinely otherworldly yet visually coherent? How do you make alien characters readable and relatable while still feeling truly alien? And now we're approaching Hoppers in 2026, an original story about beavers and technology. Even from brief glimpses, the fur rendering is extraordinary, millions of individual hairs catching light with unprecedented realism. The water effects show how far they've come from Finding Nemo. Every ripple, every splash, every interaction between fur and water demonstrates 3 decades of accumulated knowledge and technology. The technology behind the magic. Let's talk about what makes all this possible. RenderMan, Pixar's proprietary rendering software, has evolved from a basic ray tracer to one of the most sophisticated rendering systems in existence. Modern versions incorporate path tracing, which simulates light more accurately by tracing thousands of light paths through a scene. This is why recent Pixar films have such naturalistic, physically accurate lighting. But it's not just rendering. Pixar has developed specialized tools for everything. Fist for hair and cloth simulation, proprietary crowd simulation systems, custom particle effects, software, and increasingly sophisticated rigging and animation tools. Each film pushes these tools forward, and improvements made for one film benefit all future productions. The computational power required has grown exponentially. Toy Story took around 800,000 machine hours to render. Recent films require hundreds of millions of core hours. A single frame can take dozens of hours to render. The render farms processing these films represent some of the most powerful computing resources in entertainment. Machine learning is increasingly part of the pipeline. AI assists with denoising renders, helping fill in detail from fewer light samples. It aids in animation by learning natural movement patterns. It helps optimize simulations so they run faster while looking just as good. But crucially, these are tools that augment human artists, not replace them. The artistic philosophy. Here's what's remarkable. Despite all this technical evolution, Pixar's core artistic philosophy has remained constant. Story always comes first. Technology serves the story, it never drives it. When Pixar develops a new rendering technique or simulation system, it's because the story needs it, not because it's cool. They've always understood that realism isn't the goal, believability is. A character doesn't need to look photorealistic to feel real emotionally. Wally's eyes are just camera lenses, but we believe in his loneliness and hope. The emotions in Inside Out are glowing abstract shapes, but we believe in their feelings. This understanding that emotional truth matters more than technical accuracy has guided every artistic choice. Pixar has also maintained their commitment to appealing design. Characters are crafted to be visually pleasing, with clear silhouettes, strong shapes, and designs that read instantly. Even as rendering has become more complex, the underlying character designs remain strong and clear. You can recognize a Pixar character from their silhouette alone. Perhaps most importantly, Pixar has proven that animation isn't a genre, it's a medium. Their films tackle every kind of story: action adventures, family dramas, existential philosophy, coming-of-age tales, social commentary. The animation style adapts to serve each story's unique needs. They've shown that animation can handle emotional complexity that rivals any live-action drama. The first 10 minutes of Up, Bing Bong's Sacrifice and Inside Out, the reunion in Coco, these moments demonstrate that animation can be as emotionally powerful as any other art form. Maybe more so, because the careful control over every visual element means nothing is accidental. Every color, every movement, every light source is a deliberate choice. The character animation has evolved from good to transcendent. Modern Pixar animators think about not just how a character moves, but how they think, what they're feeling, what they're not saying. Every tiny gesture, a finger twitch, a held breath, the way eyes track across a room, these communicate volumes. It's acting, but with complete control over every aspect of the performance. So, where does Pixar go from here? The gap between their animation and photorealistic live action is closing rapidly. Soon, they'll be able to create anything they can imagine with complete visual realism. But I don't think that's the point. The question isn't whether they can make things look real, it's what stories they want to tell and how the visual style can best serve those stories. We might see Pixar continue exploring different animation styles, borrowing from anime, comic books, painting, or creating entirely new visual languages. We might see them blend live action and animation more seamlessly. We might see interactive animated experiences that respond to audiences in real time. But whatever comes next, it will be in service of story and character. That's the real lesson of Pixar's transformation over these 30 years. The technology is incredible, the artistry is breathtaking, but it all exists to make us feel something, to make us laugh, cry, think, and see the world differently. From the simple geometric toys of 1995 to the hyper-realistic humans and physics-defying elemental characters of today, Pixar has never stopped pushing forward. Each film builds on everything that came before. Each technical breakthrough enables new kinds of stories. Each story pushes the technology in new directions. The evolution of Pixar's animation style isn't just about better graphics or more processing power. It's about an ever-deepening understanding of how visual storytelling works, how characters communicate, how environments establish mood, how every element of the frame contributes to the emotional experience. In 1995, they showed us that toys could have feelings. In 2026, they're showing us that any idea, any character, any world can be brought to life with enough creativity, dedication, and technical mastery. That's the real transformation, not just in how things look, but in what animation can express and achieve as an art form. So which Pixar film's animation style is your favorite? Does the simple charm of the original Toy Story still hold up, or are you blown away by the technical achievements of recent films? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Pixar's evolution, make sure to like and subscribe for more animation analysis. Thanks for watching, and remember to infinity and beyond.